Hello. Here I am with another weekly reading. There is a bit of a cacophony outside of animal conversations going on. So if you can hear that, I'm sorry. I have got this beautiful little jar of aquamarine chips and adaptive, a calming blend. This is an aromatherapy necklace. So you just put the drops on the necklace and let it waft through for the day. And then I have got this beautiful jasper and rose quartz, which is always a good choice as we enter this new week and find ourselves at the end of the week in the Pisces New Moon. And Pisces is the final sign of the zodiac. So it is the point at which it's kind of like the beginning of the end, because a new moon is a beginning of something, and it's the beginning of the final phase of the lunar year from an astrological standpoint. And for some reason today, the cards jumped out of the deck upside down, and I felt called to turn them with you. So pick a number between 1 and 4. And remember that this is a collective reading. It's dated, but that doesn't matter. If you find it at another time, then it's found you for a reason, or you found it for a reason. I feel like it's more the former. And also that if you pick a number or two numbers, just be called from your heart, then that's going to give you a little bit of extra added personalizing from the reading. But that if you're looking for a more personal reading, then you can also check the link in my bio. Let's turn the cards. I'm sure we've been getting this death card, quite a lot, and the Emperor. And we've got an almost clean sweep of upside down cards. We have got two major arcana cards here, and they both add up to 4. These cards are actually, let me just turn them around for a moment. These cards are actually quite pertinent together because I'll turn them back, but you can see this is a 4 card and this is a 13. 1 plus 3 is 4. So in many ways, the lessons we learn in the beginning part of the archetypal hero/heroine's journey with the 4 card, when we get to the 13 card, we get tested by life to say, did you learn the lessons from number 4? Because now you have the opportunity to apply them, or to realize that you need to do more work there. So those two are very closely linked, and it is telling us, because they are upside down, that maybe there is a bit more work to do there. In fact, even in the way that they came out, it's like, first check if you learned the lesson. Well, you didn't, so let's go back there. And to be fair, we're always continually learning lessons. We get it, we don't get it. We get some of it, we don't get all of it. And then we have a swords card, air, and then we have a pentacles card, earth, and they're both 8s. So that for me is very interesting, because also 4 plus 4 equals 8. So we've got quite a week to build upon. 4s are like building blocks. 8s are like business-minded leaders. So if you put the 4s and the 8s together here, we have a week where we can really dig in to build something differently. If we start with the 8 of Swords, it tells me that at the moment, the sort of major theme of the week is probably that we're struggling to see ourselves clearly, because what you can see in this card is that she's not bound. She's not blindfolded. But the image that she sees in the mirror of herself is this bound and blindfolded person who is unable to do anything. She's unable to affect change. She's unable to make choices because she's bound. Because air is a card, swords is a card that links to the element of air, which links to the element of our mind. These are prisons of her own making. These are the binds that tie her, that are her own thinking, and getting trapped in paradigms of fear around thought. So the cages that we create in our own mind. But in reality, she's actually perfectly fine. But that said, you know, the truth is we never know the battles people are fighting, because you might look at somebody and think they're coping just fine with some big crisis that they've got going on in their life. Or you might not even know that there's a big crisis going on in their life because they look just fine. But that doesn't mean that internally everything is fine. And I think we all know what that is when we're going through something, but we put on our brave face and we get on with our day and we don't show all of that deep turmoil and trauma and angst and fear to the world. And yet we sometimes are not very understanding and compassionate when that is somebody else's situation. You know, you hide your own, and the more, and equally, the more we hide our own, the more we try to show up strong, even though internally we're waging war and we're feeling completely trapped and we don't know how to get through. She's blindfolded, so she cannot see a way out of this way of thinking, this way of being, this pattern that she's trapped in. Maybe she's, and in the actual self, she's just sitting there sort of lost in thought. You know, like I've looked at this from every angle and I can't see a way through. I can't see a way out. The crows are actually trying to unpick that for her, or the ravens. They're trying to unpick those ties and say it's okay to unpack some of these old ways of thinking and these old patterns, this old conditioning. That seems to be coming up for us quite a lot lately. It's okay to unpack the old conditioning. And I think the more that we resist that personally, the more that we are intolerant or judge it in others. So if you are doing a very good job of putting on your brave face and acting like you're handling life really, really well, when internally that's not true, then you'll look at another person who is obviously not coping and you'll be intolerant of them, potentially. Or you'll look at another person who's coping seemingly well, but actually not, and want them to stay with their seemingly well face and not tell you the truth of how badly they're feeling or dealing, because that would make you have to reflect on yourself, and that's where we get stuck. It's easier for me to point a finger at you than it is to look in the mirror and deal with me, especially when I take the blindfold off, when I untie and say you do have choices. And sometimes by thinking we don't have choices, it's because we don't want to make the choices. So we're making a choice to not deal with what is real. And that's common for all of us. So that's a big theme for us, which is quite interesting, because when we get to the death rebirth card, it is very much like, well, I'm going to change the pattern. I'm going to let that version of me that thinks that way, die off now, because I no longer need to think that way. That version of me is still true. That version of me is still a person that I was for a year, a decade, whatever it is. But now I am allowing myself to be reborn in a new way. And because the Emperor card is all about sort of very intense masculine energy, it links to the sign of Aries. You can see this throne he's sitting on is Mars. You can see that he is a very, it's not focusing. There we go. He is a very strong, dynamic character who really, he's a leader, he's an action taker, he's a decisive guy. And when it's upside down, maybe he's a little hampered. And the energy of Aries and the energy of Mars is not to be slowed down. They hate that, both Mars and Aries, and Mars is the ruler of Aries. And the masculine, I don't want to be slowed down, I want to move. It's a 4, I want to build, I want to progress, I want to go, I want to do. And when we get to that upside down energy, it's going, but maybe there is a lesson in patience. And in fact, you can see that he's holding a chess piece. So he's very strategic, and the floor is like a chessboard. But sometimes strategy demands a slowing, not a hurry up energy. So maybe the more mature version of our Emperor is what we're trying to achieve now, where yes, I'm taking action, but sometimes that action needs to be taken with like being responsive rather than reactive. That's a very common for Mars and Aries energy. And I'm biding my time to make this decision. And if you put these two cards together, you can also see how the flow of the energy from this card is connecting to the flow of the energy into this card. And it's taking us down into that chess piece and then across into the next card. So for me, this is kind of important. It's like go with the flow. Let it come in, let the information come in, let it download, think on it, strategize. Don't just take the obvious move, and then that's going to lead us into a card that's very cyclical. We'll get there in a moment. And you can also see some of the new beginning, kind of new way that we see through this card, through the cloak, the robe of the death archetype, and there's light there, and that light is also flooding into the dark corner of this card. These are also fun ways to look at your cards when you're doing readings, is to notice these subtle things. So if that light is flowing into the dark corners, again, don't just act from what is obvious, and that is a very reactive way to be, and it's very Aries Mars Emperor, to that's the obvious thing, that's what I'm going to deal with. But here we're saying, if we're learning the lessons, maybe we need a little bit more patience, and we need to recognize that this part here, this dark shadow, that's in process, and in process we need to sometimes be a little bit patient. And again, because it's death rebirth, we may look at the process of a dragonfly or a caterpillar or anything that undergoes those crazy transformations. They are in process. They do not just suddenly go caterpillar, bam, butterfly. That's not how it works. So let that happen. So with this, in this delayed space here, again, there is maybe part of us is resisting letting go of the patterns. Part of us is resisting that process at all. We just don't want to do it because it's hard and it hurts. And that is true. But maybe we also just need to allow it to be slower. We need to recognize that the things that cannot be seen, the internal stuff, that the internal wars that we're waging with ourselves, with deep intrinsic patterns, these are hard. This is a very Piscean reading. It feels to me like the Pisces is definitely about the death and dying cycle. And it's about going deeply into the intuition, deeply into the psychological well-being, and into the deep conditioning that goes, for lifetimes, for generations, the inherited patterns. This is a subtle thing that we can't easily grasp. Even if we did look at ourselves directly in the mirror, we wouldn't see that this was all going on. So even for ourselves, we don't always understand how many things are in process. So this feels to me like it's like a slow down and understand the process right now that you're under. You can't just have a quick death. You can't just have a quick death to have a quick rebirth. You can't just take decisive action and take the axe, to the head of that thing that needs to die and just kill it off immediately. This is actually a slow death. This is a point of recognizing the process and letting the shadowy parts come up for you to see. And then this other card where we saw the energy flowing into really beautifully when it's upright is just one of my favorite cards, Eight of Pentacles. You can see it links to the moon cycles there, which is obviously something that I'm very impassioned about. There's a lot of light radiating all the way up and radiating just circular. The whole card looks like the glow of a full moon. There's all the different tools that she needs here. So it's, even though it is an earth card, it brings in all of the elements, the fire, the books and the quill representing air, the herbs and plants and all of that representing the earth, and the bowls holding things, that is representing water, and also of course the moon is representing water. So keeps going out of focus. So here, in an ideal world, it's a very like learning to use the tools, hone your skills, use the tools you have. It's a space of being what is the word I'm looking for? In training, but that's not the word I'm looking for. But you're in training, apprentice. That's what I'm looking for. It's a space of being an apprentice and recognizing that these things are all part of our apprenticeship. Going to tap into some old conditioning that is really painful and uncomfortable. That is part of the apprenticeship. Learning when death is fast and when death is slow, and when it is a quick process and when it is a slow one, and learning how to make decisions that sometimes go against the grain. Like, certainly if you have strong Aries, I have an Aries moon, and I know that I want to fix everything yesterday, and these slow processes are very, very challenging for me. But life's been throwing a lot of those at me personally in the last, years now. And that's definitely what I'm feeling from this reading, that sometimes the slower process is more powerful and potent, even though it may feel more comfortable to just rip off the bandage. sometimes that's not really the most effective. So in an ideal world with this card upright, we're starting to recognize and practice our skills, and that apprenticeship where you are doing practical things to learn how to hone your skills. And when it's upside down, it's like, yeah, but maybe it's not all going to come all at once. Maybe it's not as simple as that. Maybe you can practice that skill on 5 people quickly, but you need to practice it on 500 people over time to really understand. 500 people with the same issue, and that doesn't just happen overnight. That means you have to wait for 500 people with the same issue to show up at your door for you to deal with, learning how that operates in the world. And that is just something that's going to take a little time and process. Do you know what's so interesting for me as well is that I'm just thinking Saturn is in Pisces, and Saturn is all about skills over time and mastery and apprenticeship and that sort of thing. And he's in Pisces right now, so I feel like he's speaking strongly through this reading, saying, and he's all about structure, 4s and 8s. And it's hard to be structured in a water sign that symbolizes the entire ocean. So it feels to me like Saturn is just saying, and while we're in this ocean, we are going to have to deal with deep emotion, with deep old patterns and conditioning, and it's a process. Saturn spends two and a half odd years in the sign. He's been there a year. He's still got over a year and a half left. So we just have to recognize we're in process. And I think that maybe if we see that for what it is, we can just calm down a little, because it's not going to be sorted out in a day. It's a slow journey. And so we need our stamina and we need our energy. So we need to feed ourselves well. We need to sleep well. We need to nourish and rest and find joy in the gaps, and trust that this process is potent and powerful, and that everybody is undergoing this, even though we can't always see what they are experiencing. So you do you stay in your lane, stay on your side of the street and focus on keeping that clean. Try to find forgiveness and compassion for those around you. And also work on your boundaries, personal boundaries. I'm doing my side, you do your side. We each are responsible for our little area, our little boundaried space. And the more that we can get neat and tidy in our space, doing our work, the less our wounds and traumas spill out and bleed on others. I hope you have a beautiful week. My link will be below. Please like, share, subscribe, follow, etc. And I'll be back next week.